Is Pope Francis changing the long-standing teaching of the Church about homosexuality? Find out this week on Faith Questions with Father Dan. So all across the national news, we're hearing about the words of Pope Francis, and these are the words that we're hearing. Homosexuals have a right to be part of the family. They're children of God and have a right to a family. Nobody should be thrown out or made miserable because of it. What we have to create is a civil union law. That way they are legally covered. Before I enter into a discussion of what this means or what this could mean, let's talk about what the reaction has been, which is clearly the Pope is approving civil unions for homosexuals. And that departs from what the church teaching has been for some time. So many are saying Pope Francis wants to change the laws of the church and what it is that we believe. That's what is being reported, and that's what people are hearing. So a couple of comments. First, this is coming from a documentary about Pope Francis, and it compiles many of the different things that he said in different interviews. The interview was conducted in Spanish, and this actually doesn't all come from the same exact interview. You see these ellipses here, they come from a completely different interview, and they don't mention any of the context for the Pope's words. It's kind of frustrating to think that just 2 weeks ago, the Pope released an encyclical called Fratelli Tutti. It is almost 40,000 words long, and I haven't quite finished reading it yet. But the only words of Pope Francis we're going to hear about during this entire year probably are these words. And they were given to us in an edited form on a documentary. In fact, these words that Pope Francis says are contained in an interview that was conducted not just this year, but prior, and it explains that he's responding to the frustration he has on his part for being misquoted by media outlets. So we have yet another example of people grabbing onto words of the Pope and distorting what it is that he's actually trying to say. So another point that I want to make sure that is very clear is there's a misunderstanding of the role of the Pope in the Church. When the Pope writes definitively, ex cathedra as we say it, from the cathedral, from the chair, he can pronounce church doctrine in an official capacity. That is far removed from the situation here. He was being interviewed in an informal capacity and explaining things as a human person, not a papal decree, not an encyclical, anything official. This was just him speaking what it is that he believes and what he thinks. So it's not going to become a part of church teaching as it stands. Just to sort of think that that would be the case is a misunderstanding of how the church works and the role that the Pope has in the church. The church has taught and continues to teach that marriage is between a man and a woman, and any sexual activity outside of marriage is considered to be immoral. That does not change with these words, as much as people maybe wish that that were the case. So we have once again an example of people taking Pope Francis's words out of context and saying, this must be what the Pope is saying, because this is what we want the Pope to be saying. What is the Pope actually saying here? Let's look at the first part of it, right? Homosexuals have a right to be part of the family. They're children of God and have a right to a family. Nobody should be thrown out or be made miserable because of it. Pope Francis is not talking about having a family in the sense of having children, being married. He's talking about belonging to a family. He's talking about being kicked out of your family because of a sexual orientation. That's a very different scenario. It's very important that we have a sense of belonging to a family. You cannot just cast someone out because they disagree with you. Nobody likes those Thanksgiving dinners where somebody brings up political conversations or somebody starts talking about things about which they disagree. When you do, it's awkward, it's frustrating, maybe people leave, but no one leaves the family. You're still a part of the family, even if you don't like one another for a while. Pope Francis is saying, no, we can't just oust people out from our family, from our churches. We have to be understanding and compassionate, and that means that sometimes we're going to disagree. We're going to argue about things, we're going to maybe fight about things, but we're still a part of the family. They still have to be a part of the discussion. That's what he's saying here. They are children of God. Even people who are doing things that they shouldn't be doing, people who are living in sin, that's the purpose of the sacrament of reconciliation. That's the purpose of asking God for forgiveness for all of us. We are all sinners. And so when we talk about what Pope Francis is saying here, he's saying we're all a part of God's family. We have families with whom we belong, and I suspect anyone who's been a parent knows how frustrating it can be when a child is doing something they think they shouldn't be doing or making a terrible mistake. In that situation, the love that we have for that person doesn't kick them out of the family. You might kick them out of the house, you might punish them, but in the end, they're still a part of the family. That's what Pope Francis is getting at here. Let's look at this second part. What we have to create is a civil union law. That way, they are legally covered. That last sentence, I think, gives some context. We don't have context for these words. We don't know what was before and after. But legally covered means that we're talking about rights, citizens' protections, those sorts of things. He doesn't bring up marriage at all. Using the terms civil union in Spanish is probably akin to what we think of. So I don't think we can distort Pope Francis's words in that way. We can't pretend that he's not talking about that. And yet he is not endorsing what it is that the culture around us has endorsed, that same-sex marriage is the same thing as what we talk about as a sacrament of marriage. They are not. Pope Francis is not talking about equality in that way. He's not saying that they're the same thing. He is talking about the importance of treating them as the children of God and giving them a sort of legal protection. Now, again, we don't have context for his words, which is incredibly frustrating. And that's one of the things that frustrates all of us, I think, about the world around us. We hear sound bites, we don't know where it's coming from, we don't know what the circumstance is, and it's easy to paint someone in a positive or a negative light depending on what's going on. My recommendation is this. Don't just focus on these words. Don't just focus on what you're seeing in a sound bite and overreact. Look at what he actually says. Do some digging on the internet and read what he actually has to say. In fact, read his encyclical, Fratelli Tutti. It's long, but it's profound and it's very well written. And I think it's generally very good. I think it's worth reading. So don't get too caught up in the media firestorm that's going to last probably a handful of days and then we'll move on to something else. But know that this is not changing church teaching. This is not Pope Francis going off the deep end. This is just, as often happens, a misunderstanding of something that was taken out of context and in the end doesn't really mean a whole lot for you and me. God bless, and we'll see you next time.